Okay, all right. Tonight's a pretty important talk for me. Normally I don't do a lot of prep. I spent the last 3 days working on this talk tonight, and I hope I can successfully bring it all together for you like within an hour. Otherwise we're going to be spending the night. But it's been an intense time for me. I'm at the age in my life where I'm the same age as my father was when he committed suicide. And he took his own life 1986, feeling like he was completely convinced that he was a failure and as a father, as a husband, in his career. He had multiple sclerosis. He was living alone. My parents had broken up. He really didn't have very much to live for. And, you know, on the surface, if you looked at me and looked at him, you might say, my, oh my, you two are really very different people. And that's not true. In fact, you know, I find as I go through my passages in life, the crossroads in life, that at each pivotal, important one, critical ones, I reflect at that time that my father was here. He faced this dilemma. It's like looking in a mirror. And we are different because I'm here and he's not. Because he took a left turn. Took a lot of left turns. I took a lot of left turns in my life too. But tonight's talk is about making up our mind around what turn we're going to take, given what circumstances and what view of ourselves and of life we have in the middle of those crossroads. I'm going to be talking about, this is a talk about changing the course in life that you would naturally take given the impact of that kind of tidal wave of family style or story, history. You know, without intervention, without new information, we can carry on a tradition quite easily. So I'm going to be talking about 3 different stories in my life, 3 different times in my life. I'm also going to be breaking up those 3 stories into 3 sections, the beginning, the middle, and the end, of where I took a right turn. And given my family story, I didn't even know what that turn would have been because I wasn't taught what that turn would be, that right turn would be. None of us do until we take it. So the first story I'm going to tell you it happened many, many years ago when I was 21 and 22, and I got a job at a place called the Maples in Burnaby, which is still there. It's a residential treatment center for severely emotionally upset children, teenagers. It's a residential, very intense program. They're there for sometimes 6 months up to a year. And I got this job. There was 200 people that applied for it, and only 2 people got the job, and I was one of them, and I didn't even really know even why. As it turned out, at the time, when I was interviewed, I broke down in the interview telling my story about my previous job where I had to give feedback to my supervisor that was not so nice. And it was very, very hard for me to do, and I told a story in the interview, and they gave me this job. I guess they thought that I was, I had integrity. Or something. I didn't even know what the job actually was. It was a child care counselor. So when I went on the job, what am I going to do here? I wasn't even sure. But in any event, it was a treatment center. And 3 or 4 staff would work from 8 to 4, and another 3 or 4 would work from 3 to 11. There would be an hour overlap. Follow me on this, because the staff would meet for an hour. And at the Maples at that time, in the 70s, there was a really intense support of staff to do their personal work, connect and heal themselves. And so it was a deep kind of sharing that would go on in these staff meetings. And it was very important that everybody spoke. Now, I'm 22. I come from the east end of Vancouver. I didn't even know why I got this job. People in my family didn't talk about intellectual things. They fixed fences. They're all farmers. Or drank beer. And I was pretty tuned into at that time in the early 70s. I mean, I had taken LSD in the late 60s and done that whole psychedelic trip and musicians. And I mean, the 60s were a pretty exciting time. So my brain was opened up a little bit to what might be possible. But there I am sitting around this pretty sophisticated and eclectic group of people. And everybody had to talk. So if I was at 6 o'clock in the circle, the circle started at 7 going that way. And I went, oh, it's not me. It's the first time I've had to talk. And it started going around the circle. And this meeting is in a glass cubicle. In the old days when they built mental health facilities, they had a glass office so you could see down all the wings to make sure nobody's doing something bad. And there was no air conditioning, and people drank coffee and they smoked cigarettes. Like you could barely breathe in there. And all I wore in those days was sweatshirts, and some of them were like a year old. You know what happens to a sweatshirt after you've washed it out 500 times? It gets faded, right? You know what happens when you put 1 drop of water on it? What happens? It shows instantly. Well, I am feeling anxious. And it starts going around the circle about who has to talk. Like, it's up going up to 12 o'clock now. It's coming around my way. And when I started sitting in this chair, I had 2 little slits under my armpits. 2 little slits. By the time it got to 5 o'clock, the slits had met. I mean, you have no idea the anxiety that I was feeling. And it came to me. I'm just going to tell the story up to this point where I got really stuck, as I will do with the other stories, and I'll carry on. And we'll come back to it. But it came to me, it was my time to talk, and I couldn't. I was frozen, okay, so we're just going to stop that story at this point. We'll come back to it. The second story is, and this happened just about 7 or 8 years ago. In 1990, I came down with arthritis in my left hip. I'm going to try and rush through these stories. I got so much to tell you tonight, and I want to get it all in. One of these stories could take an hour if you let me. Don't let me. Thank you. I can always count on my wife. About 1990, I came down with arthritis in my left hip. Being an East End kid, I prided myself, defined myself a whole lot on my body, and playing sports and hockey, and I was scouted by the majors in baseball and played junior B for the Grandview Steelers. Hockey, I was sports were it. I came down with arthritis in 1990, and I couldn't do a thing. Hardly anybody knew that. I couldn't walk for 2 blocks without having to sit down. I was in a lot of pain for 15 years. Hardly anybody knew. And so in 2005, I think, right? 2005, 4 or 5, I got a hip replacement. One of the modern ones that athletes were having. I didn't do anything for 15 years. Nothing. 0. So I had this hip operation. It was like a miracle operation. I mean, I was just absolutely astonished. After about a month, I'm actually beginning, I'm off the crutches, and I'm walking briskly without a limp, and next thing you know, I'm running. Next thing you know, I'm doing physio. Next thing I'm doing a 5K marathon with Catherine, who did the half marathon. That was after about a year of this. I mean, this is pretty incredible. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to pick up tennis again. Tennis was really one of my faves. And my old friend, my tennis pro, he was also a good friend of mine. I called him up and I said, hey, I'm back. I had this hip operation. I'd like to start playing tennis again. He said, oh, sure, good. Let's go out and play. So we go out in the court, and I'm feeling kind of nervous, 15 years. And he hits the ball to me, and I'm really, like, I don't want to disappoint him. Like, do I even belong here? And I got to keep the ball in the court, so he hits the ball to me, and I end up choking up in the racket, and I end up going, poof, you know, poof, poof. Like, I got to keep it in the court. Like, I'm so concerned. Like, maybe it wasn't that bad, but it was like I was not hitting the ball very much at all. I was being extremely careful, not wanting to disappoint him, wanting to have some success. And he stood at the back of the court, and he looks at me, and he says, and he comes walking to the net. He wants me to come to the net to have a talk. That's story number 2 that we're going to stop at. Story number 3 is my relationship with Catherine. In the very early years of our relationship, we met in 1996. It happened fairly quickly. I was not very honest about my ability to get there quickly, pretending I could, and I actually couldn't. I was hiding a lot, running a lot, playing a lot of games, a whole lot of games. And Catherine was very, very ready, committed, willing, wanting. And I kept on creating a distance. I didn't want to leave, and I didn't want to go. I was confused, but I really wasn't being that honest about what my dilemma. And there's a whole story there too, which I could tell you, but you don't want to hear that whole story. You know, basically, I didn't want to disappoint my mother because I always protected my mother, and my mother was just a beautiful, wonderful lady, and so was Catherine, and I couldn't be honest about my difficulty, so it kind of went underground. And I would do things to keep a distance. For many of you that have been to other lectures, you've heard this piece of the story. When something would be going wrong, I would kind of throw out this little shot at her, not to end the relationship. I would say to her, you know, maybe this isn't working out. With no intention of ending the relationship, but just keeping her at a certain distance where she would start not pressuring me. It always worked. It's not like I even consciously did this. It's just what we do to make it work. You know, maybe it's not working out, Kath. And she would kind of move the goalposts because she had her whole story about moving goalposts with her father. And then one day, she turned to me and said, Duane, the next time you say that, I'm going to believe you. That's the end of that story to this point. All these pivotal moments, right? All these situations bring up previously drawn strategies on how to deal with difficulty. We're guided by it. I am guided by it. I'm not the only one there. My dad's whispering in my ear. My whole all the family, the whole generations of family are telling me what to do here and how to view it. We're listening to that all the time. I would default to a strategy on how to deal with this difficulty, and it would be kind of fear-based, contracting into this kind of box where I'm kind of saying no. Like, I can't trust this situation. I'm saying no to wanting to know anything else other than what I think is happening at this moment, and that is I'm in danger. Something bad is going to happen. How shall I deal with this? All these things are kind of unconscious. The toolkit comes out, and that toolkit was handed to you. So at the Maples, right, and I'm in that circle, what strategies am I going to have to deal with this situation? Well, there's terror. Terror is kicking in. Well, I could suddenly get ill. Right? Anything to avoid this, I've got to talk. I could lose my voice. I could pass. Pretend to have to go make a phone call or go to the washroom. Say as little as possible. Complain maybe about the heat and people smoking and or what I would really do with all else failed, two things. Either apologize for being a complete, flawed, misfitted human being, or quit. Right? I don't belong here. Rather than dealing with this, I'm going to go back to the pub where my dad was. In tennis, what could I do there in terms of my strategy? What was the impulse? Well, the impulse is, I didn't do very well there, so I'm going to keep on with the same strategy, but I'm just going to do better. I'm going to get better at ping pong. The tennis club I belong to, there's a lot of people like that. I go away for a year and a half and come back and they're at the same level of tennis because they're just practicing their mistakes over and over again. I could just learn how to play that ping pong better and maybe play other people that play ping pong too, instead of tennis. Or if I make a mistake, it doesn't go in, I'm worried about what he's thinking, right? I could get angry at myself as a form of letting them know that I care about you, that I'm giving you such a boring time. So I'll just get angry at myself as a way of dealing with this. Curse myself, and again, or just apologize for being such a flawed human being, or quit. With Catherine, a little more complicated. In those moments, right, there she's saying, the next time you say that, I'm going to believe you. I could go out and play tennis. No. I can defend. I can up the ante. Have a fight about that. Are you giving me an ultimatum? Right? Put pressure on her. I could make her wrong. I could fantasize about being somewhere else. I could have an affair, which I did. I could scare her. Into moving the goalposts again. I can do all kinds of things there that's all about making her change rather than taking a look at what's going on for me. And again, I can apologize. The ultimate end, I can just apologize for being such a flawed human being. Or quit, end the relationship, and just move on. So life becomes a box with this strategy system that we have been given that's very, very familiar. And it's a small one. I think the graphic that I've prepared for you there flatters how big we actually are in comparison to what could be. But in that box, we all want happiness. Right? We want happiness. We want passion. We want freedom. We want to have it all and pine for it. But that big happiness cannot fit into that small box. But we expect it to. That big box you could characterize as being like in a state of love. The little box is like being in a state of fear. You cannot be in fear and love at the same time. We want all the glory of happiness, but we're not prepared to do anything to have it. We just want to stay in our box and be happy. We want to stay fearful and be happy. The irony is the very thing you want in the middle of your fear, in many cases, is the last thing that's allowed in. The very thing that you pine for in the middle of your box, even if it was there, you don't even notice it. For example, I'm going to keep referring to my father because it's such an important parallel here for me. But when I don't know how old I was. I probably was in first or second year university, and I was taking psychology, and I decided to interview my father. So I asked him, I said, Dad, what was your relationship like with your father? And within 2 or 3 seconds, he was bursting in tears. Gee, I should be a psychologist. I'm doing good work here. I said, what? He says, I don't know if my dad loved me. I never had a chance to prove to him who I was, like my other brothers. When the war broke out in the farm, one son would always have to stay back on the farm. All the boys couldn't go to the war because in case they all didn't come back, somebody had to take care of the farm. My father was the youngest, I think. Yes. And he had to stay back on the farm. And he always felt like he could never prove himself to his father. And he would just burst. It was one of the only moments in my entire life with my father that I feel like I got a real clear glimpse into what was going on for him. The rest was just mostly drunken. And it was odd because after he committed suicide in 1986, I went back to Alberta, where the farm where he grew up in. And I interviewed the guy that used to catch for him. And he used to play very high-level tournament baseball. He was also almost a professional baseball player. And so I went and interviewed, I found the guy that used to catch for him to actually find out if all the stories my father told me were true. Because he claimed he pitched against Satchel Paige, who was one of the best chuckers, black chuckers of all time. They never got a chance to play in the majors because he was black, but they used to tour the country for tournament ball to make money. And they challenged my father's town, St. Bride's, Alberta, to a game. And I found the chucker, or the catcher. And I said, he started telling stories about these games. And I mentioned to him, I said, my dad said that, did you know my dad was? He said, oh yeah, we lived not too far from each other. We grew up together. And I said, my dad once told me that he felt like he could never prove himself to his father. My father was Paddy, so was his father, Paddy O'Kane. And he said, your grandfather used to get on his bike and ride that bike sometimes 50 miles to another small town where your dad was pitching. And he'd watch him pitch all the time. Somehow my father deleted that piece of information. The very thing he wanted the most, he wasn't even aware he had. And we do a lot of that. So I just want to make that point about the irony of this box. Because I could tell you even more stories. Clients we see where everybody's saying what they claim they want to have in their relationship, and there's evidence of it, but they don't see it. They keep on looking at, if you're a cynic in that box, you're going to see what a cynical mind wants to see, which is things to be cynical about. So we sit in this no state of mind. I call it the reloading state of mind. No is like reloading. You get anxious, you're in a difficult spot, and you reload your strategy on how to deal with it. And you're no to any new information. You think you've figured it all out and you know what to do. And in a way, we sit in the bleachers then of life, in fear. Cautious, careful, looking out. And not entering the playing field, which is what that blue territory really would be. The box becomes like the bleachers of life. And when we're in the bleachers, please follow me here, because to me, I tell you, I've been working on this for 3 days and it turned into a science for me. I felt like I could write a book about this. Because this piece, it just really excited me. In the bleachers, folks, in that box, you become an expert on life in the bleachers. We all become experts in the world that we're living in. We meet friends there in the bleachers. What do we get to know sitting on those seats in the bleachers? We get to know hardness of seats. We become experts on, boy, this stadium has harder seats than the last stadium I was in. They had cushions in that stadium. Right? You get to study seats. What kind of cushions should I bring? Where's the best view in the bleachers? Where's the washrooms? Maybe I should get an aisle. Yeah, I'll get an aisle so I can get to the washroom quickly because I'm drinking a lot of beer. I learned how to drink beer. What is the best beer? Boy, the prices are steep here. Right? We have conversations and relationships. The relationships become consistent with our experience watching life instead of living it. And we call that reality. And we want all that excitement on the playing field. And we want it sitting on that seat in the aisle, drinking our beer. We become experts in the world that we are aware of. The other world actually doesn't even exist. So at the Maples, when it came time for me to talk, my strategy was, what did I notice there? What did I become an expert at? I become an expert at avoidance. Noticing disapproval. Knowing where the exits are. I become an expert at running and being alone. I become an expert on what the best brands of antiperspirants are. It's true. Right? That's where my attention's going to go. I got to figure out how my survival kit's going to work best. I got to know the products. What's going to help me here? Antiperspirants. Mostly how I become an expert on learning how to compensate for having nothing to say. The belief that I have nothing to say. And I compensated with humor and outrageous behavior. In high school, I was known as Duane the Card. Duane's got guts, doesn't he? I had reputation for the stuff I would do. All to compensate for the fear that I thought I was. I became an expert in successfully managing my anxiety with all kinds of tricks and games. So in tennis, in that state, I would become an expert, as I said earlier, at ping pong, at practicing mistakes. I become really good at playing bad strokes. Of playing it safe. I become an expert at avoiding embarrassment. Right? This are all the stuff that my life will be consumed by in the bleachers. Avoiding disapproval and learning how to do just enough to qualify but not to excel. I would figure out I just have to do enough to stay here. But I would not develop any great skill. Just enough to stay there. In relationship, I become an expert at hiding, avoiding, noticing disapproval, looking out for it all the time. Why does she have that tone of voice? She's disapproving, I know it. What do I have to do to please her? I become an expert at managing and controlling her to keep her away from finding out that fear I have about myself. I become an expert at that secret life. I had an affair. I became an expert at learning how to blame her in those early years and get away with it. So in the bleachers, how far can this go in terms of that kid? Because we still want what's on the playing field. You know, to me, this says more about addictions than anything else. That we cheat in the bleachers. We steal the experience of the field sitting on our butt on the bleachers. We do nothing but take a pill or drink or take a drug to have a quasi semblance of that experience on the playing field. But I haven't changed anything. I'm cheating. I think it says more about addictions than anything else. It's like we want to steal that experience. And so this is the world I lived in and the world I got to know better and better and better. It was a very, very similar world to the one my father had, I am sure. I'm sure he had an affair too. My mother thinks so. She doesn't know for sure, but she thinks so. I think we walked through those crossroads. We're more like our same-sex parent particularly than different. So in the box and in the bleachers, we only notice what we need to notice to stay there. That's why my father's impression of himself is unlovability. He would only see what he needs to see to stay there, which would be to censor off the information that his father loved him. So, you know, one of the most important things in learning how to experience this happiness, passion, and freedom is to realize, first of all, it cannot happen in the box. We must leave our citadel of defense and move from the known and the predictable to the unknown and the mysterious. To turn that no into a yes, we have to take a risk. I just finished reading Leonard Cohen's autobiography, and it was a wonderful passage in there that just had me weeping when I was reading it. He had a pretty strange dual existence in his musical life. Like, he had an ego that was up to all kinds of crazy games, but another part of him that was so pure in his art, so profoundly pure in his art, that he would go to this island in Greece called Hydra with Marianne, who was the one he wrote the song about, So Long Marianne. And at the beginning part of his career, he would spend days and days and days not eating, not washing, not doing anything, but just sitting there, getting out of his comfort zone. Because he said, when I get out of my comfort zone, my box, where everything is comfortable, no new information comes there. He would do it just to get uncomfortable so he could bring in some new information. I was very touched by that. We have to make up our mind that the no will never bring anything more than it already has and is. We can't keep turning to it. What is that saying in AA? My very best thoughts got me into this mess. Why am I turning to them now? And we do, over and over and over and over again. Fear-based decisions only bring back to you what you are protecting yourself from. The very thing you're protecting yourself from is the very thing that's going to bring back to you. It's a wonderful cartoon I want to show you. This is just the truth. This is what happens. So we have to give up management of our own dilemma and begin the journey onto the playing field. we have to be willing to enter the question rather than what we think is the answer over and over again, our repetitive, habitual answer, our habitual conclusions that we draw from our toolkit that's always beside us. We have to be willing to learn something else, something more. That's a humble moment. I am willing to learn something else. I know many people who claim they are willing and aren't. You know, like that's got to be 100% sincere. And to enter that state and decide more on who you're going to be instead of what you're going to get. So like in these situations, in these difficult situations, in these three stories, not to enter the situation to win, to get some outcome, but more to decide who I'm going to be entering it. When Olivia's introduction, she was talking about who should I be with. I didn't hear it all. It's hard to hear back there. But I think I got the gist of it, you know, that perpetual debate about should I be with this one or should I be with that one? And we have to deal with that situation a lot of the time. And I always say to the person, you know, decide who you're going to be rather than who you're going to be with. And let who you're going to be with be determined by who you actually are. So for me it was to be brave and honest and willing to trust no matter what happens. That when I'm just being myself, if that is in truth what I am being brave and I am being honest and I'm stopping the games. I put down that toolkit. I'm going to be brave and honest and reveal me. Whatever comes from that is going to be the best, even if I was entirely alone. So standing there looking out and walking onto the playing field, instead of reloading in the bleachers, right? Reloading the strategies, I'm going to reflect instead. I'm going to make up my mind to reflect instead of reload, primarily, ultimately. I'm going to reflect instead of reload. I'm going to make up my mind. So I'm going to come back to the second part of the stories, not the third part, the second part. The third part's really neat. So Howie comes to the net. Right? Howie comes to the net. And he said, and this is where the word came from. He said, Duane. I said, what? Do you want to play ping pong or do you want to play tennis? Make up your mind. I said, Howie, I've been away from this sport for a long time. He says, I don't care. I want you to play tennis, not ping pong. I want you to actually hit the ball with everything you've got. I said, why would I do that? If I hit the ball with everything I've got, it's going to go over the fence. We're going to lose balls. He says, I got a big bucket here. I want you to hit the ball as hard as you can with as much gusto as you have. I want you to totally to commit to this shot and learn the full magnitude and expansiveness of that decision. No caution, no care. Like learn the full dimension of it. And after we do that, then we can start fine-tuning it. Okay, that's as far as you can hit the ball. That's as hard as you can hit the ball. Now we can start, we'll adjust your grip, we'll adjust your speed, we'll adjust your stance. We'll start fine-tuning it, we'll start bringing it back down to the court. But I don't care whether it goes in the court. You know, we're not playing a game, Duane. I'm coaching you. I'm not keeping score here. You're keeping score. I'm not keeping score. But I want you to play tennis. And he put his hand on my shoulder. And he said, make up your mind. I think that's it for that part of it. Right? And then the maples. So there I am. The slits have met. Everybody's looking at them. And the person beside me, who was my supervisor, put her hand on my shoulder. And she said, and it was the last thing I wanted to hear, is, Duane, I just want to support you right now. Right. That's all I need is support. You know, there's no way out. I've been found out. Somebody has to support me. But the hand came on my shoulder. And in other times, you know, that could have just bounced off of me and I could have gone into that trip if that's the last thing I need is support. That's just confirming that I don't belong here. But it didn't bounce off of me. So in that moment, I knew I had to go forward. So I committed. In the same way with tennis, that I'm going to commit. I'm going to commit to, when that ball comes, I am just going to go, whoosh, total power. Just watch the whole thing go. And with the maples, I am going to speak no matter what happens. I'm done with this running and hiding. I'm done. And with Catherine, she may not remember this part about that moment where she said, the next time you say that, I'm going to believe you. You know, she didn't say it in, Duane, the next time I say that, you say that, I'm going to believe you and I'm out of here. Wasn't that? She took my hand. Said, Duane, the next time you say that, I'm going to believe you. And that's not what I want you to do. I love you. I'm ready. Make up, you know, she didn't say the words, make up your mind, but that was the message. Decide. So in all three of those situations, I'm having to make a decision about what it is I actually want to learn to enter the playing field off of the bleachers, right? Big decision. I have no program for this. I have no information for this. I have no modeling for this given to me. I am going to enter the unknown, and it presents that whole question that we have, and we say in all the other lectures and all the workshops, is the universe a friendly place or not? I have to decide that I am willing to take the risk that it is. I am giving up management in this situation. And in that moment, all three of those situations where I'm now going to take on a new program, I'm giving up management, put down the toolkit, I'm going to walk into this unknown and not be fooled by the need for outcome, but more, who am I going to be? I am going to be brave, and I am going to be honest, and I'm just going to be me, whatever that is, and whatever comes from that, I'm going to live with, because that's all there is. That's all I have is me. That's it. Folks, this whole process is about finally coming to that place of reconciling the fact that who you are isn't such a bad place to be. But until you actually visit there, you're not going to even know that. You're just going to worship the idea that you're not and have all your coping strategies and all that toolkit to keep you away from that face-to-face with yourself. In that moment, as you walk forward, you will become instantly aware of all your fears of a negative outcome. Fear of being found out, fear of rejection, fear of what you are. We call this the suspicion of self, or the SOS in our work. The moment you step out, it shows up. And that's not necessarily bad news. It's good news because you're seeing what actually is driving your bus. It's not hidden anymore. It's going to show its teeth. So this requires consciousness and awareness. Rather than your anxiety running the show with no question or thought on your part, right? You're just running, your anxiety is just pushing you around. So rather than your anxiety dealing with you, now you can deal with it. Everybody understand that flip? And realize that it really can't get any worse than it is where you are. The outcome of your current strategy just will perpetually backfire. This takes some awareness, consciousness, a moment where you're actually conscious and not just running your anxiety running your show. And you spend the moment you're born to the day you die just being pushed around by your anxiety, not changing it one iota and passing it on to the next generation to do it. You know, I don't know if I had a moment with my father where we were both aware and conscious at the same time talking about our lives together. That moment he talked about his dad, you know, it happened. I don't know how conscious, you know, we didn't have a conversation about the ramifications of that. Not very much. Awareness and consciousness is everything. Before you even take a step, if you have the awareness and consciousness that you need to take one, that's not negotiable anymore, it's not a debate anymore, you know that you've already taken a step. You may have already done something nobody in your family system has done before you. So to reflect rather than reload and go to the unknown instead of the known. And look what you run into. You run into your suspicion of self and your fears. So that the first step there is to identify what that fear is. Identify what is the history of that. What is actually driving this madness? You know, my life story as being an only son of a binge drinking Irish alcoholic speaks a whole lot to my suspicion of self. I had the same question about myself with my father as he must have had with his father. This is what was lying in the basement of my psyche. This question about myself. And again, this is not bad news. This is good news that you can look at it instead of just being pushed around by what you have to do to avoid it. I mean, how many people do you know that are just their whole lives are just being pushed around by their anxiety. They never stop to reflect. They're just perpetually reloading their strategy system to avoid that place. Is there a moment of consciousness? So with the maples, you know, there I am. What is my suspicion of self? They're underneath my strategy of what I have to do. I told you all those things that I could do to avoid it, mostly to compensate for the fear of what I am. What I feared I was is that I'm a failure. That I'm flawed, I'm a fake, I'm second class. No one in my family system ever spoke about anything that required any kind of discernment or utilization of intelligence that way, or cognitive abilities. They're all laborers and farmers. It's not that they weren't smart people, but it was a whole different, it's more what you did, not what you thought. Bottom line is, my SOS is I do not belong. The big one there was I'm a failure. That's my greatest fear. I'm just a failure as a human being. Tennis, I'm a failure. Flawed, fake, second class, I don't belong. This is just more evidence. I've been found out. He's pulling me to the net. He's going to scold me. He's going to tell me I don't belong. But as I walk into, okay, now I'm going to step in, that's what I'm going to run into again, is this fear that I'm a failure. With Catherine, exactly the same thing. that I'm a failure, I'm flawed, I'm a fake, I'm second class, and I do not belong. Bottom line, here's yet another woman, another disappointed woman, as my mother would be disappointed with my father, as my previous relationships, in the end, it just, Duane, you didn't come through. Off they went. I don't belong. I'm running into that. And this word failure was ringing a lot of bells for me. Now, this is the dark night of the soul in some ways, is our making our decision that we're not going to bind our anxiety anymore, go to all those strategies, we're going to start facing it. I'm going to face it. I'm going to become what we, in our book we're writing right now, we're calling it being emotionally responsible. I'm not going to play any more games with the world and what do I have to do to cope and what I think I need to get and how I need to steal it or avoid it. I'm going to become emotionally responsible. I'm going to face myself. So this meeting the SOS as we move out, this black line is what we run into, the suspicion of self, and it gets thicker as we become more intent. I mean, it really turns up, cranks up the volume. It's being put there for a reason in your family system to keep the family safe, to protect themselves for things that have not been worked out in the family. You can take our PRAC program if you want to learn a lot more about that. But there will be a moment where the fears will want to take a stranglehold and will attempt to obliterate your goal of walking forward. This, folks, is not a time for giving up. This is a time for faith. My father did not have faith meeting this one. He completely bought it. This is where you can change the course of your life. To change your course of your life, you have to go through this baby. And I believe once we're intent and ardent on that passage and that voyage and that journey, that it takes 15 minutes to change the course of your life. It doesn't mean there isn't more work to do, but I think it takes 15 minutes of solid consciousness and awareness and decision making and making up your mind where you're going and what is true versus what isn't true. It takes 15 minutes to change that. Now I want to read you a passage from A Course in Miracles that really speaks to this kind of spiritual crossroads we walk into. When you come to the place where the branch in the road is quite apparent, you cannot go ahead. You must go either one way or the other now. For now, if you go straight ahead the way you went before you reach the branch, you will go nowhere. The whole purpose of coming this far was to decide which branch you will take now. You could put in there, make up your mind. The way you came no longer matters. It can no longer serve. No one who reaches this far can make the wrong decision, but he can delay. And there is no part of the journey that seems more hopeless and futile than standing where the road branches and not deciding on which way to go. And it is but the first few steps, that's the 15 minutes, this is the first few steps along the right way that seem hard, but you have chosen. Although you may think you could go back and make the other choice, this is not so. A choice made with the power of heaven to uphold it cannot be undone. Your way is decided, and there will be nothing you will not be told if you acknowledge this. That's a powerful passage to me. There will be nothing you will not be told if you acknowledge this, if you don't have the awareness and the consciousness of it. Everything you need to know on the other side of this big black wall, you will be told. You'll be given all the tools you need to continue your journey. But the first few steps are like blind faith. It is like a test in a way. You have to be absolutely certain. Nobody's going to be leading you, pulling you, directing you. This is the time for you to establish faith. Is the universe a friendly place or not? Can I give up management? Can I trust? Being myself is the best thing that could ever happen to me. So we have to let go of outcome. I will trust that whatever happens here, being myself, is what I shall live by. And there was a time in my life, it's not in these three stories, it's a whole other story where that's what it was in 1994. Where I made up my mind then too, that even if it means I'm never going to be with somebody again, I am no longer apologizing for who I am and my existence and my flaws. I have stuff to work on, but I'm no longer ashamed of it. I'll do my work, but I'm going to be proud of myself and bless myself instead of curse and attack myself for it, or cover myself up with some persona or mask to compensate. I will admit, in letting go of outcome, I will admit that I do not know what to do, but I know who to be. I will be myself. Whatever comes from this is the best. I will live entering the question, the unknown. I will trust the universe as a friendly place. That is now a fact. It's not a debate anymore. I will live by values instead of strategy. Honesty will replace lies. And this particularly came up around the affair. This is a very, very serious crossroads Catherine and I came to, which I am extremely proud of the work we've done to move through all the passages that we had to move through, and things like lies, and that was a lie. Are just not part of my life. That's just not part of my life. I replace lies with honesty. I'll replace defense with vulnerability. And I'll replace righteousness with curiosity. That's who I'm going to be. I'm going to enter with that, leaving the toolkit behind, or emptying it and putting honesty, vulnerability, and curiosity in it instead. That's my toolkit now. No matter what I run into, that's what I'm going to use. So we enter the playing field. And I'm willing to fail, knowing that all I'm doing is being myself. Like the failure is about outcome. It doesn't matter. What's more important is I'm here to learn. If you talk to any successful businessman, they'll tell you that success is 99% failure. They were willing to fail, but they learned in their failures. I am willing to learn. The outcome is not my goal. Who I am is my goal. I will step forward. I will enter. You have to, if you want to learn how to sing, you have to take the risk of learning how to experiment with your voice, which ain't going to sound so good at first. You have to try tennis strokes, not ping pong, to learn how to play tennis. You have to open your mouth to learn how to talk. The big one is you have to be in a relationship to learn about relationship. Be in it. And if you're consumed by outcome, none of this is ever going to happen. You're not going to learn anything. You're just going to be focusing on failure. You won't learn a thing. So if you're not willing to fail, you actually will never win because you're never in the game. If you're not willing to fail, you can never win Because you're never really in the real game. I'm going to tell you the last part of the story now. All right? So we're back to the Maples. Let's go back to the Maples. I'm sitting there, hand on my shoulder, I want to support you. I can't get out of this. I mean, I could just get up and run. I can't get out. I'm not going to, I'm going, I got to go somewhere else. I'm here for a reason. There's something else I've got to do it. And I started talking. And I'm sure, and 2 minutes is a long time when you're speaking gibberish. Where I think not one syllable of what I said was understandable. Not one. Thank God I was in a treatment center. I was surrounded by people that just stuck it out with me. Instead of saying, what is this idiot doing here? And I got through that 2 minutes. I went through a 2 minutes I don't think anybody in my family system had even dared enter. I could have spent my whole life avoiding that 2 minutes. Right? Quite easily. And just be convinced I'm a person that doesn't know how to talk much. Just play sports and drink beer. No, I talked and it was gibberish. It was nonsense for 2 minutes. And then those syllables started, thoughts started coming out. I started to make sense. I must have talked for about 10 minutes because I slowly not only started making sense, it started to become interesting. I actually had something to say. I started noticing I had something to say. I started noticing people were listening to me. I started noticing people liked who I am here. I'm not just a failure. People are actually interested in me, supporting me through this struggle. There's something else going on here. These people want me to win. And I started talking and I started getting excited, and within 5 or 10 minutes, I was eloquent. I thought, what was that? It was intelligent. You actually had something to offer. What a concept. You're not just a failure. You're not just a fake. You're not just a second class. You actually have something to offer. And the sweat started receding. I don't know about that. I just threw that in. I think it might have. It might have. But that whole journey in my life at the Maples, was really a phenomenal birthplace for me because I walked through that 2 minutes, and that 2 minutes turned into 2 days, 2 months, 2 years. I started flourishing, learning about that territory. On the bleachers, you learn about the cushions on the seats. On the playing field, you learn about grass and the mud and body contact and here and now and sweat and excitement, and you learn about where you are. I was learning lots. What is this world? I love it. And the requirement to get there is I had to burn through my SOS, trust the process, trust the friendliness of the universe to experience the friendliness of the universe. You won't ever experience it until you trust that you're going to experience it. Because if you don't trust you're going to experience, you're just going to gather information that it's an unfriendly universe. Because that's what you do in the bleachers. You will only get the information you need to stay where you are. If you get on the playing field, you're going to start gathering information why you should stay there. Because guess what I've made a living doing now? I talk a lot. Tennis, it was just, I already demonstrated something, but that's what I did. I got out there, I said, okay, let's do it. And he hit the ball to me, and I mean, I can't do it full speed. I'm going to hit something. But it was, instead of this, I got to get in the court. Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to just give it everything I've got. And the balls did go over the fence. And he said, hit it over that one now. That side. How about that side? Look at the territory that you can hit a ball to. Look at the power you had. Let's adjust that grip and put some spin on it too. And I spent the last 7 or 8 years bringing all that big game into the little one now. The skills that I learned out there. You will see what you need to see. You will get creative. Because you don't have a program to deal with it. You're like a rookie. You're a newbie. You're raw. You're naked. You're exposed. You need to get some new information to survive in a way. So what are you going to learn about? You're going to learn about the new jungle you're in. With Catherine, what did I learn about this new territory? Well, it's an ongoing process. We would be certain of in relationships. They don't just suddenly get there and you stop there. We keep doing our work. But let me tell you what I've learned there. I've learned that well, first of all, I learned that she is the most incredible human being. I mean, an astonishingly incredible human being at every level. I do not know anyone that has more integrity about having absolute balance in her life, respecting all the different aspects and quadrants of her life, like mind, body, soul, the whole thing, eating, exercise, honest communication, integrity, responsibility, being a wife, running a household, like everything she does with values like I've never known. I certainly have learned that. And in those early years, that's not what I saw. I saw somebody that just wanted to engulf me, much like the women in my family had to do for me to take care of them and protect them against my bad dad. Here's another woman that's just going to eat me alive. I didn't know that she didn't want to eat me alive. She wanted to actually love me. She wanted to love me. What a beautiful thing. And what a beautiful, it's no longer a concept. And what else did I learn? That I can accept it. I've learned how to be honest. I've learned about how to care for another human being, to consider another human being's interests is no different than my own. I've learned what it means to be in a relationship. And on the playing field, everything wakens up. Catherine's a whole lot better at it than me. She's been there a lot longer than me. But I will tell you, for those in Clearmind that do 4 steps, or don't do 4 steps, do a 4-step. There's no faster way to get off the bleachers and bust all your crazy games and get on the playing field and show who you are and what you're committing to and letting somebody know you. Because like I said, I don't think I ever got to know my dad. I think he died not being known. I know him now. Boy, do I know him now. But we know when you do a 4-step, when you're on that playing field, you really do it right. You are known, and there is no greater fuel for love, intimacy, and passion than knowing who each other are. And knowing that you have a privileged place with that person, knowing them to that extent. And what that can add up to in terms of your ability to experience each other. I'm trying to be really careful here with my words. But the sex is great. It's not so great in the bleachers. In fact, you can get dead in the bleachers because you're not there. You're not there. When you are there, here I am, and there you are, and I'm living by values, boy, intimacy becomes a profound form of communication to each other as opposed to outcome. What am I going to get? That's what the bleachers are all about. What am I going to get? What can I steal from this person, take from their body? No. On the playing field, it's more, who am I going to be, knowing who this person is, and I'm communicating through contact. All the things we're talking about here. My surrender, my humility, my love, my values. I noticed, what did I learn there? I noticed that I have a home to take care of. And a home to take care of me. And that's something my dad never knew he had. And he did. I'm making up my mind to remember what my father forgot. I want to read you an email of a person that just recently took the awakening in Europe. That this just came to me the other day, and it just kind of landed with everything we're talking about here tonight. I've got this kind of awakening that can happen. She says, my cousin committed suicide in 2000, and the whole impact on me and my family was devastating. But for me, I took it personally. I had failed him, so that became to me that I was a failure in life. And the whole reason I came to Clear Mind was because I was still struggling, and the unthinkable of suicide became thinkable to me on a day-to-day basis. I remember Duane asking me on the first day of the Awakening workshop what I was hiding from when I covered my hands on my face when I spoke. And he didn't stop asking that question until I told him the reason was because I didn't want to share what I felt still, that I was scared, vulnerable, and I thought if I shared with Clear Mind, if I shared, Clear Mind would cart me off to the hospital. So I truly trusted, and slowly my life has become to change, has started to change. I put my hands down and took another look there. And I thank all the teachings of Clear Mind, and I also thank you for this. It was a post that somebody was acknowledging her. She said, I thank you for the post, which has made me realize how far I have come. Thank you deeply from that lost little girl stuck in the basement of her psyche to standing in the sun on her balcony and enjoying life again. That's a story that kind of haiku summarizes everything I'm talking about. It's about that decision to go where you haven't gone before, to go into the unknown, to put down the toolkit and trust something else other than what you are always turning to. So take a good look. No meant reload. Yes means reflect. Yes means remember the truth about yourself. You didn't create a new truth. You remember the real truth about you. Yes means reflect. Yes means remember. Yes means return. Yes means reclaim. And in that, yes means reward. Take a good look now. Take a real good look. Catherine loves me. Catherine cares for me. I belong just as I am. Keep looking, Duane. Keep looking. what you can do here, how creative everything is. Keep looking. Look at that love that Catherine has for you. If you keep looking, God is actually trying to peek at you through her eyes. Do you see it? Do you see it? You are not alone. This is where art is. This is where those words came from at the Maples. No ego, surrender. This is the here and now. Take a good look at the truth about you. How good can you stand it? The goal here isn't connection and participation. The goal here is what connection and participation gives you a view of. And it is the universal heart that is so profound, it is lonely without you, Duane. This is the here and now. This is the truth about you and the other. This is the truth about life itself. I will not accept anything else other than this truth as the truth. This is what this is all about. Take a good look. I am not in charge of this. No one is. It just is. It is reality. This is reality. No one needs to be in charge of reality. I love reality. And this all adds up then, folks. I mean, the only thing I live for is the opportunity to be creative. And this is the only place it happens. Whether it's being creative with Catherine, be creative in the tennis court, be creative when I speak about entering this unknown and just diving into that unknown field and watching the necessity of art and creativity take shape. So as we enter, we feel everything. We grow, we're creative, and we feel all that life has to offer. Which isn't just joy. In the literal sense, coming off the bleachers, watching a game, it's not just going out there and winning. It's out there, like I said earlier, getting muddy, messy, alive. So do you want this? Or do you want to enter the playing field where it's playful, it's messy and muddy, it's painful, it's real feelings that happen, loss, grief, love lost, and it's mushy. It's all of those things. It's all that life has to offer. And you're not in charge of any of it. That's what the Awakening Workshop is. That is what the Awakening Workshop's goal is to give you a glimpse of this, an experience of this. Our hope is that you get a glimpse of the human condition that is blinding. And you will never forget. As that Course in Miracles quote said, you know, a decision made with the power of heaven to uphold it, because I think that's what it is. Cannot be undone. Once you see it, you cannot forget it. You can never learn how to you can never unlearn how to ride a bike. Once you've had the experience, it's there. It's forever changed. So I welcome all of you to come and join us in that. And I thank you so much for going through this with me tonight. Thank you.